Okay, we ready?
Waiting on you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pure Faith Podcast. So it is an episode, but what's
A little faster, please. You gotta be able to keep up.
Are you ready?
We already started.
Oh, okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pure Faith Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things Bible. I am your host, Michelle Waymeyer, and with me is my co-host and brother, Mitchell Heitkamp.
You're talking really slow.
Oh,
Hello.
sorry. If you haven't done so yet, we ask that you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit the notification icon to be notified when we release new episodes. And we also ask that you check out our website, which is purefaithliving.com, which is linked in the show description below.
Good job. Okay, so yeah, nobody has any notes for this, so
Yeah, so Mitchell was procrastinating and he didn't print the notes until he came here tonight, and then the printer didn't work. So
it's true.
I think I offer every week to print them.
Well, I was gonna print them at work, but my printer at work has cancer.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh,
So you get all kind of black circles everywhere on
oh my gosh.
I've had
the one here just died. It didn't have cancer, it just died.
I've had complaints from some people that my notes
Yeah, that is right.
So I don't print them at work. And I forgot to print them at home.
Well, I have a printer at home, so if you need me to print them next week, I probably can.
Well, I have access to plenty of printers. I just need to remember to print them.
I actually was going to talk to you about next week because I wasn't sure if I was going to be here next week.
I'm not going to be here next week.
You're not? Oh, because I was going to see if Matt would do it, if he would fill in for me.
No, we're going to have to either do it a different night or postpone week. We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. Just so you all know. Yeah.
Don't let us forget.
So what else is going on? Everything's good?
As good as it could be.
Good. Do you know, some of you know this, and I know you know this, I have been working out with your wife.
Yeah.
She's an animal.
Okay.
I am not lying. You see small little page and you're like, yeah, I'll work out with you. Sure. Yeah, let's go. She had us at the gym last night. And she's like, don't worry. I know she's going to chuckle at this. She's like,
she's got to watch it first.
Right. She'll watch it or she'll listen to it.
She'll chuckle in a couple months.
Oh, I will tell her to listen. Okay. Well, if nothing else, Beth will listen and Beth will tell her. So anyhow, and Beth wasn't there last night, but she's like, we're going to bench press. I'm like, oh, I don't even know how to do that. She's like, what? She's like, okay, we won't put any weight on the bar for you. I'm like, oh, so I just have to lift the bar? I got this. I lay down and I get the bar and I'm like, yeah, I can't do this. She's like, what? I'm like, I can't lift that bar. She's like, it's 45 pounds. I'm like, it's 45 pounds? I'm like, I can't lift that bar. So she's like, I'll get you the smaller one. So she gets the smaller one. It's 35 pounds, I think. I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. So I'm lifting the bar with no weight on it. We add the weight for Paige. She's an animal. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you got some muscles.
I've never worked out with her.
Don't. It is not fun.
Actually, I think I have.
Actually, it's super fun working out with her, but she's tough. She really is. But you can ask her about, you'll have to ask her about the exercise routine I wrote and see how she did with it. It was so funny. Oh,
I guess you just had to be there.
Yeah, you did. There were some people there, and I think they laughed. So yeah, it was funny. So anyhow, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
Are you tired?
No, not really.
Okay. I hope everybody enjoyed our episode from last week. We're a little goofy.
You were a little goofy. I was normal.
You laughed. Normal. You laughed a lot last week.
Yeah, you hurt me.
And yeah, he was so red. He was laughing so hard he had tears coming out of his eyes. But just so an update, I've been watching The Chosen. I think I've finally completed season 1. I did get all my work done this week also.
Well, that's good.
For all of those coworkers who could be listening or watching, I did get it done. Okay. I've said enough.
Okay.
You're like, yeah, you have.
So it's my turn? Can I
It's
talk
your
now?
turn.
Okay.
We have no notes, so I just
I
figured
know.
nobody knows where it's supposed to be going tonight, right? So,
Well,
oh, you have notes.
I have notes.
Mm,
So
good.
I guess
I look forward to this.
too bad for everybody else.
We're just gonna sit and look at you.
Sorry. Should have dressed a little bit nicer then.
I like your shirt. I was gonna wear my bibs tonight. Then I thought I better just keep them because we have a track meet on Saturday and it's gonna be cold and rainy, I think. So aren't they the perfect thing to wear to a track meet?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, I wore bibs Monday to work,
Yeah.
and yeah, that didn't go so well.
I don't want to know.
So it's been sweatpants the rest of the week. Hence the reason I have sweatpants on.
Information.
No. Too much information to be telling you that I had a vasectomy last week.
Yeah, I do know this. We do not need to discuss it. Oh my
So
gosh.
that's the reason for sweatpants. You can talk about menopause, but I can't talk about vasectomies.
Told you we don't need any more high camp boys.
No. No.
The 3 you have are enough.
We have 3, and we love the 3 we have, and we decided that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't do 4. All right.
Did you find your place yet?
Yeah, I'm just scrolling up and down, just looking at this. Whatever.
It's time to get started.
Okay, we'll get started. Okay, so at the end of the last episode, we discussed John 2, 1 through 5.
I don't know.
Oh, you didn't have notes for that either, did you?
No.
Somebody's failing. Anyways.
I have a map.
So there we discussed the fact that Mary, Jesus' mother, went to the wedding at Cana.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus was also invited to the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And the disciples were invited to the wedding, probably on their own accounts, not because of Jesus. And so, yeah, that's where Jesus did his first miracle.
Yep.
He turned the water to wine.
Yep.
And then after the wedding, in John 2:12, I believe it was, yes, Jesus, it just, one verse just tells us that Jesus traveled from the wedding in Cana. Him, his family, and his disciples went to Capernaum. So that is where we are going to. What, you forget to set your timer? So that's where we're going to start now. So again, we are covering the different movements that Jesus makes, the different locations that he's going to, and then we're also going to just highlight the miracles that he does. We're not going into depth on the miracles because this is about all the things that happen between Matthew 4:11 and Matthew 4:12.
Okay.
So the next thing we're coming to is John 2:13 through 17. And this reads, "The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, 'Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade.' His disciples remembered that it was written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" So again, like I said, we're covering the main points. The big point here is the fact that Jesus went from where he was in Capernaum, and he traveled down to Jerusalem for Passover. And Passover was one of those festivals that I'm not going to go into detail about what actual Passover was, because that would be an episode all of its own.
Oh, okay.
But it has to do with the final, what's the word? The final plague that was in the Exodus from Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Passover comes from for those who are curious about looking into it. It's in Exodus, the final plague on Egypt. But this is an annual festival that all Jewish males are expected to go to
Okay.
travel from wherever they live, their homes. They're expected to travel down to Jerusalem for this festival. Well, there are two main things that happen while Jesus is in Jerusalem. The one we just read, which is where he clears the temple. The other one is he speaks with Nicodemus, the Pharisee. So we're going to look at this first one, the one I've already read, and then we'll cover the one with Nicodemus. But first thing I want to look at is the fact that it says it was the Passover of the Jews and that Jesus went up to Jerusalem. That's opposite of the way we speak today because we have maps and look at everything like that. So whenever we look at a map, we typically look at north as up, south, down. Well, back in this day, they said they were going up to Jerusalem, but they were traveling south. They say up because it's higher in elevation. So for them, no matter where you were around Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was the highest point and the temple was up there at the highest point, so everybody traveled up to Jerusalem. And then you would travel down from Jerusalem to everywhere else.
You said he was traveling from Galilee? Where did you say? Or Capernaum?
Capernaum.
I mean, that's a heck of a distance.
It is. And they made that journey every year. So, I don't remember what the actual distance was. I didn't look that up, and I don't remember from last time I taught it, but it was, well, we know from Canada, Nazareth is 9 miles. So,
Oh my.
how many pinkies is that?
That's a lot of pinkies.
It's a lot of pinkies.
You said it's 9 miles right here?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was just looking at the map and I just thought, my goodness, that's
The only note you have? That's what you're looking at.
I have to keep my eyes on something. So, I'm looking at the map.
So, again, like I said, the first thing I did was he cleared the temple. The reason that Jesus was so upset about the fact that this merchant area was taking place in the temple was for the fact that it was in the temple, not the fact that they were selling these cattle and sheep and goats and pigeons and all this other stuff. I mean, that makes sense because people are traveling, like we just said, long distance.
That's a long distance.
They're not going to bring their sacrifice with them all that distance. So it makes sense for them to just take their money, travel up to Jerusalem and just buy what they need once they get there. But the problem is they took this marketplace and put it inside the outer courtyard of the temple. So a general overview of the temple is there's different levels. And the most innermost is the Holy of Holies, which is a place that only one select person will go into once a year.
Right.
And then there's different levels going out to the outer temple, which is where these money changers and everything were. Well, the outer part was for the Gentiles. That's where the Gentiles were allowed to go into the temple, and they couldn't go. They're Gentiles, so they can't go any further, but they can go into the outer courtyard. That was their place to worship. And then the next row in was for the Jewish women. Next row in were for the Jewish men. And then you start getting into the priests and all their stuff.
Okay.
So one of the things why this upset Jesus is because with them turning this outer courtyard into a marketplace, the Gentiles
had no place to go.
They didn't have any place to worship.
Right.
So Jesus kicked everybody out and was like, this is for the Gentiles to come and worship.
Yes. Okay. Makes sense.
So.
First time I've ever heard that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That explanation. Never knew that.
Yeah. So the next step that we have, or the next stop, is John 3, 1 through 3, and you'll see this on your notes. So this reads, Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. I'm going to stop there. Again, there's a whole account with Jesus and Nicodemus,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not concerned about the actual account. But the one thing I do want to point out is what Nicodemus says to Jesus. And Nicodemus says, No one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. So, what signs?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are the signs? What is he
So,
doing?
exactly. And it's not recorded. Because the only two things that are recorded are clearing the temple. And I'm pretty sure he's not talking about clearing the temple.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Jews agreed with what he did there because yes, it was wrong for them to be in the outer courtroom or outer courtyard, but so a lot of people supported Jesus in that decision and for doing what he did. But this is talking about signs and other signs. So we have to assume that Jesus was doing signs and wonders and maybe even miracles
Hmm.
while he was in Jerusalem, but none of them are recorded.
Okay.
So we don't actually know. All we have is what Nicodemus says here. And I mean, anybody could go into the courtyard and kick people out.
Right,
So
right.
that's not
That's
really
not
a
right,
something that you have to have God with you to do that. I mean,
right.
any Jew could have been like, "This is wrong. Get out." So Jesus had to have been doing something that was bringing forth attention. And this is going to come into play again later as we get a little bit further down. So we're going to come back to this whole idea.
Okay.
Um, we're going to go ahead and go to the next section, the next scripture, and it's John 3:22-24. So this says, After this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside, and he remained there with them and was baptizing. John also was baptizing at Aenon near Salim, because water was plentiful there, and people were coming and being baptized, for John had not yet been put in prison.
Hmm.
So again, we're looking at the different movements that Jesus makes. So he went from Capernaum, went down to Jerusalem for
Mhm.
Passover. Didn't say exactly how long he was there, but after Passover, him and his disciples went into the Judean countryside. Where exactly? We don't know.
Mm-mm.
A lot of scholars believe it was near this Aenon, near Salim,
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah, if you see it,
Yeah.
but that doesn't really make much sense in my mind because as we start getting through the next few sections that we're going to cover, he would actually, if he was up near Aenon and Salim,
Mm-hmm.
he would actually come back south before going north. But the way the scripture is worded, he has to pass through Samaria to get to Galilee. And that might not make sense now, but it'll make sense whenever we cover it here pretty soon. So we don't know where he was for sure. We just know that it was in the Judean countryside.
Yeah.
Um, the reason a lot of scholars believe that it was near that Salim or Aenon is because of the next section that we're going to cover. And also notice that the last verse 24 of that,
I can't
John,
notice it because I don't have it in front of me.
well, I read it. You're supposed to have this visual
Oh,
memorization.
gotcha. Okay. Yep.
But John had not been put in prison. So
Yes,
John is still,
I did hear that.
see? So why are you questioning me if you...
Because I couldn't remember. I mean, you're older. I got short-term memory loss.
So many things I could say. So yeah, John is still not in prison. So as we know from Matthew 4:12, that Jesus chooses to go to Galilee once he hears about John's arrest. So that's how we
Okay.
know that we're not to Matthew 12 yet, because John the Baptist is still out baptizing.
Yes.
So, how much time we got?
About 10 minutes.
You don't know.
I got a timer going.
So the next section we'll cover is John 3:25 through 30. And this reads, Now a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him. John answered, A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom, who stands and hears him, rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, but I must decrease. So, this is John the Baptist's second witness about the fact that Jesus is Messiah.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, this goes on and there's more to this. I just took that first little section of it because
You
I don't
needed
want to read
something.
all of it. Yeah, I don't want to read all of it. Um, but again, this is John bearing witness. So again, John is not in prison. John
Mhm.
is out here talking about this. But after this, John's story starts to get fuzzy. At least his timeline gets fuzzy because we don't have any biblical scripture that tells us this is when John was arrested, or even this is when John was beheaded. I mean, the beheaded is covered, and almost all the synoptic gospels talk about it, but they don't put it really in a timeline. In all of them, it's talking about something that had happened. So, again, we'll probably cover those when we get to them, but that's all. Most of those are talking in past tense. Like,
Okay.
this is what had happened and stuff like that. But, um, so again, we don't know exactly when John is arrested, but it is around this time frame. But I want to cover the next section.
So he's arrested while he's doing the baptism.
So sometime while he is up in that Anan
Okay.
is when he gets arrested.
And he's baptizing here is what he's
Yes.
doing. Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this next section, and then I'm going to tie them all together.
Okay.
So the next one is John 4, 1-9. Now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, Give me a drink, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? And again, there's a lot more to this
It's
story.
one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. But again, we're not looking at the actual story. We're looking at the timeline. Like, where does this actually fit into the timeline of everything that's going on with Jesus? Well, something that we need to keep in mind is, because like I said, we didn't know exactly when John was arrested, but it's somewhere in the same area. But we have to remember John was arrested because of what he said to and about King Herod.
Oh.
So it wasn't the Pharisees, it wasn't the Sadducees, it wasn't anybody from Jerusalem who was going after.
Seeking him.
Yes, this was King Herod.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in all those accounts that I briefly talked about, whenever it talks about the actual death of John the Baptist, in those, it also says that whenever King Herod learns about Jesus, he thought it was the spirit of John the Baptist coming back to get him. So King Herod doesn't know about Jesus at this point.
Mm.
So Jesus isn't being pursued or
Yeah.
anything from
Mm-mm.
King Herod or even the Pharisees or Sadducees. So like there's no rush, there's no fleeing, and that's going to come into play because I think this is very important in understanding why Jesus chose to go back to Galilee. Because he wasn't fleeing, he wasn't being
Mm.
pursued, like I just said. He chose to go back to Galilee. And this is, and I think one of the key things to understanding why he decided to go back was in John 4, 1 through 3, which we just read. But it said, now when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. So again, this is the same time frame that John the Baptist was arrested. So the way I understand it, there's two possible scenarios here, and they're pretty much the same, so it doesn't really matter which
Mm.
one's which. But so Jesus is out in the Judean countryside baptizing with his disciples, and either, well, the first scenario is John the Baptist. He gets word that John the Baptist is arrested by King Herod. And then he gets word that the Pharisees, who they had looked into John's ministry, like early on before Jesus' baptism, and they determined that okay, his ministry wasn't anything that concerned them, so they let him go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he wasn't being pursued by the
Mm-hmm.
Pharisees, Sadducees. It was King Herod that arrested him. Well, now the Pharisees and Sadducees are getting word that Jesus' ministry is becoming bigger than what John's was. Well, now that piques their interest. Now, like, oh, now we need to go investigate this Jesus and see if his ministry is something that we need to be concerned about. Now, keep in mind, Jesus was just in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, the only story that we have of Jesus' teenage years
Mm-hmm.
is him staying behind after his family traveled to Jerusalem for Passover. They took off thinking Jesus was with them, but he wasn't. He stayed behind. They went back to get him a couple days later, and he was in the
In the
temple
temple. Mm-hmm.
talking with the Pharisees and
Yes.
Sadducees
Yes.
who were impressed with his knowledge and learning and all this other stuff. So that is possible that some of them that were there then were still in their positions whenever Jesus came to Jerusalem. But we also have to remember, yes, Jesus may have done signs and wonders. We don't know exactly what he
What they
did.
were.
We know he cleared
Mm-hmm.
the temple courts,
Mm-hmm.
and we know he talked to Nicodemus, who
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that he did signs and wonders. But he wasn't really, at that point in time, he wasn't saying he was Messiah. He wasn't really doing anything crazy. He was, I mean, he might have been doing signs and wonders, but it wasn't anything where he's
It was
rustling any feathers.
minimal,
Yeah,
under the radar type thing. Like
yeah,
it wasn't anything that was
They didn't feel threatened.
yes.
right.
They weren't. He wasn't doing anything to threaten them at that point. So now he's out in this countryside, and he gets word that they find out that his ministry is growing
It's
bigger than what
growing.
John's was. Well, okay, now he knows that John the Baptist was arrested. Now he's getting word about the Pharisees. So it makes sense for him to travel further north back to Galilee to get away from Jerusalem and the headquarters of the Pharisees and Sadducees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That way, just put that distance.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the way, he travels through
Yeah.
Samaria, through Sychar,
Mm-hmm.
and meets with the woman at the well.
Yes.
So the other option is just the fact that Jesus learns about the Pharisees and Sadducees and learning about his ministry first. And then John the Baptist gets arrested.
Hmm.
He's like, well, let's travel north. Either way, it doesn't really matter which one happened first.
Right.
Once we get into Matthew, we'll see that the way Matthew words it, that it was the arrest of John that triggers him to decide to go back north.
Okay.
But like I said, he wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't fleeing. He
Mm-mm.
chose to go back north just because he wanted to get further away from Jerusalem. So whenever he goes and meets with this woman at the well, he ends up spending 2 days there. That's
That's
another
right.
sign
Right.
that
That there's
he
no hurry
wasn't,
in any of it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because we see this in, yeah, I want to do this last section. And how much time we got?
2 minutes and 26 seconds. I was very precise that time.
Okay. So the last one we're going to cover for this episode is John 4:43 through 45. And this reads, After the 2 days he departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast. So this verse 43, after the 2 days, Jesus spent 2 days in Samaria with the Samaritans there
Mm-hmm.
and with this Samaritan woman and teaching. I don't think he did any miracles while he was in Samaria. They all just believed off of his word.
Okay.
Well, first her
Her
word,
word.
and
Mhm.
then towards the end they're like, well, we initially believed because of what you said, but now we've heard him speak ourselves, and so now we believe because of what we have heard.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then the next part, and again, just the fact that he spent 2 days there was another key
Right.
moment that tells us that he wasn't in a hurry.
Right.
But when he gets back to Galilee, he is praised for all the things that he did in Jerusalem. So this has to be all the things that Nicodemus was talking about, all these signs and wonders that we don't know what they were. They weren't recorded. So, but these Galileans, they were there. They seen what Jesus did.
And they're praising him.
And so now when Jesus gets back to Galilee, he is being praised for all that he did because they witnessed it. And so now they're all, yay, great. Jesus is Lord.
Yes.
Whatever. And this is where most scholars say that Jesus' public ministry officially starts.
Okay.
Because up to this point, it's kind of been quiet to himself, but it was after that first Passover, and once he gets back, and now
It's multiple
public.
people instead of just
Yeah.
one person or a few people.
Yeah.
It's now multiple people.
And he's starting to do signs and wonders and miracles, and so now it's
Mhm.
everybody's starting to find out about him, so it's no longer private, it is now public. So after this, we're going to get back into Matthew 12.
Nice.
Yeah, that was only a short detour.
It was a short detour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
A lot
when
of
we come back
information.
next episode, I'll do I don't know, I might do a recap up to this point,
Okay.
or I might actually wait because we're going to go to Matthew 12, and then we're leaving Matthew again.
No. Oh.
Then we're going to Luke for a little bit,
Oh shoot.
but then we'll end up coming back to Matthew and be Matthew from that point on. Well, I say that for a
No
little while.
surprise.
For a little while. Yeah, because even between Matthew 4:12 and 4:13, there may be another significant gap in time. Depends how you interpret what the scholars believe.
Okay.
But we'll cover that when we get to it.
Very interesting.
Sure. I think it's interesting.
It is. It's just interesting how it all ties together to me.
Yeah. That's why I didn't want to just go through Matthew and skip this whole year, because there's so much that happens in this year that you would lose the idea of what's all happening.
And how it builds up.
And
Yeah.
the sequence of events and everything else. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
So we thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pure Faith Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or if you just want to send us a friendly hello, then leave a comment on the video, and you can go to purefaithliving.com and send us a message through our contact page. And as always, if you like what you hear, then we ask that you share the show with others so we all can work together in spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will talk to you again next time.
Have a blessed day, everybody.
Good job.
Yay!